Oh, hello there. Yes. Do they mean us? Yeah. Those of you of a certain age, well, let's face it, it's all of you, aren't you? You're all boomers. Yeah, we'll remember Derek Jameson, yes, from his TV show all about funny foreigners back in the days when they were funny rather than threatening. And also, though, back in the days, of course, when newspaper guys, blokes invariably, were actually, quite sort of working class types who had actually sort of, but basically stayed in touch with their roots somewhat and did certainly reflect a kind of working class sensibility, something our current media across the board don't do so. Yes, even those that complain about the media elites. And yesterday we had a classic example of what can only be described as enormous chutzpah by Alison Pearson. Yes, her again. I'm going to be slagging her off again for most of this, but it's well worth it. She had two pieces in the Telegraph yesterday, one of which is well worth quoting from. So this was the first one that cropped up. Greg Wallace's revolting banter is far from banter, yes. Imagine just saying things thinking they're okay and funny, Alison. That would be awful, wouldn't it? The MasterChef presenter is not being cancelled for having a laugh. His demeaning remarks would not be tolerated in any modern workplace. Yes, imagine coming up with remarks that wouldn't be tolerated in any modern workplace. Yes. Anyway, she tells a tale of a friend of hers called Amy, or someone she's calling Amy, who ran into Greg Wallace, who obviously is just a really sexist, horrible human being. We knew that already, let's face it. But anyway, moving on. On several occasions, I have tried to publish stories about Wallace. Regular readers may have spotted heavy hints in this column. No. But for a journalist to avoid ruinous libel actions, you need women who are confident enough to go on the record. Understandably, those like Amy are far too nervous, fearing they never work again. Yes, it's a huge problem, libel laws in the UK, but we'll come back to that point. That's why the 60-year-old spectacular own goal on Instagram, he claimed his accusers were just a handful of middle-class women of a certain age, was more revealing than he knew. Yes, imagine being that tone deaf and not realising exactly what it is that you're saying. It's only women who are well established and therefore likely to be older that have the ability to criticise the BBC star, BBC again, on a vaguely equal footing. Even then it's not easy. Amish Mir was a popular read it on there. Even then it's not easy. Yes. Anyway, now the BBC has the cheek, BBC again, to try and make it look as if it was their own inquiries that caused Wallace to stand aside from MasterChef. In fact, after I mentioned Amy's horrible experience, the Telegraph's investigations team began digging and take full credit for exposing many allegations. Yeah, it's all about her, you notice. Yeah, it's the reason why Greg Wallace has finally been brought down by the feminist powers at the Telegraph or something. But then we move on to the real cherry on the cake. Wallace is so lacking in self-awareness, we are talking Alan Partridge levels of smug obliviousness, that it seems he had no idea he was being pilloried. Instead of being chastened, he did apologise, but no doubt only after a PR team wrestled him to the ground. He lashes out rudely at what he sees as the stuck-up middle-class women who dare to point the finger. Yes! Think about that. Imagine somebody who is definitely one of the nation's sweethearts, like Alison, that's suddenly having the finger pointed at them for a bit of harmless banter. No, not in Greg's case, obviously, because he was allowed to be this bad by the BBC. It's all the BBC's fault, apparently. Now, moving on to the BBC in question. Most of the Tristans, yeah, it's that class thing again. Imagine all those awful middle-class people in the media that indulge these kind of types, eh? Not that you get those at the Telegraph, you understand. And Tristans who run the BBC have never met a working-class person. They probably think the way Greg, the Peckham fruit and veg guy, talks to women is perfectly standard amongst common people who aren't privately educated. Again, not the sort of thing you'd find at the Telegraph, naturally. The way he's so upfront about sex delightfully authentic, darling. Yes, you see, that's the imaginary person Tristan, because this isn't all about the imaginary stuff in Alison's head, okay? It isn't about in any form of reality, because obviously it'd be awful if there was a whole bunch of out-of-touch, middle-class, publicly school-educated people who didn't understand ordinary people running a news organisation. That would be awful. Awful, awful, awful. How condescending. Most working class guys wouldn't dream of speaking to Amy and other young women like a revolting perv. Would be awful, wouldn't it, if, people indulged in that kind of things that they think of as banter. Things that realistically these days are unacceptable, like, I know all that sexism. I can't think of any other racism things that racism things. Anyway, later on in the day, she got another piece finished, which links down below. I'm not going to read this one out, but you can read for yourself. And it's full of exactly the same stuff, all right? We must fight to save British culture from the self-hating elite. After my run-in with Essex Police, I've been inundated with stories from readers about the alarming way our society is changing. Yeah, and in this piece, she manages to bring in Spitfires and the war on Christmas, because they're all interlinked, because people like me that dare to suggest that Alison is a media elite who is completely out of touch and has a strong string of an ism running through pretty much everything that she does, is of course causing the collapse of everything, isn't it? Yes. The Telegraph is really running with this, though. They also had this: the Greg Wallace scandal exposes the BBC's neurosis about class. It's all the BBC's fault. Working class men are few and far between at the corporation. No wonder its middle managers had no clue how to rein him in. Yeah, these middle class people that are faced with some personality who's paid a great deal, that can just, write whatever they want. They wouldn't dream of reining them in because they just don't understand properly. I can't think of anyone that reminds me of, apart from every single person who's paid an absolute fortune at the Daily Telegraph to tell me how wrong I am about everything. And of course, Alison is very worried about, all of those libel laws that she might well be affected by. Although, oddly, the sub-editors of the Daily Telegraph don't seem to have any ability to counteract what she writes in terms of things that might well be considered very, 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 very racist. But there you go. The piece whereby she was inundated with people actually manages to have a strong amount of racism running through it, because of course she does have some history of threatening people with libel action. Not that she would do that, of course, but she would do that, wouldn't she? But just astounding. No ability to have any mirrors in the room whatsoever when they write this stuff. And at the same time, it's all the fault of the BBC because they're such a middle-class public school boy style institution that just don't understand the common bloke like Alison does. Anyway, Jesus, where do they? I mean, I'm increasingly just think to myself, I don't understand the bubble anymore that these people are in. And it's not just that they're in a bubble, that's absolutely fine. I appreciate that to a certain extent with, middle class people, the upper middle classes. But Jesus, to then point the finger magically at others is really something. Alan Partridge-like. Yeah, as Derek Jameson would say. Or is that somebody from Carry On? Possibly. Anyway, do have a gorgeous later on in the week. Thank God it's been a long, slow one again. Do have a lovely one if you can.